The Theater History Podcast is supported by HowlRound, a Knowledge Commons by and for the theater community. It's available on iTunes and howlround.com.
Hi, and welcome to the Theater History Podcast. How do we reconstruct performances from a bygone age? That's one of the questions that keeps coming up over and over again on this podcast. Well, when it comes to the 1800s, at least, there's a great website that helps us to answer that question. It's 19thCenturyActs.com, and one of its designers, Dr. Anita Gonzalez, who's a professor of theater and drama at the University of Michigan, joins us today. Dr. Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here.
Could you begin, please, by describing what 19thCenturyActs.com looks like? How is it organized? And what can visitors do when they visit the site?
19th Century Acts is an interactive web page that's designed to visualize performance. The site is a suite of tools that can do several different things. In one section of the tool, you're able to look at a map where you can see the voyages and track the journeys of performers like Jenny Lind or Ira Aldridge or Jacob Adler or Edwin Booth. In another section, you can see videos where photographs come alive they give you information about the 19th century. There's another place where you can see people. In the people section, you can view either actors in their dressed as their characters, or you can see their postcards of what they might have looked like during the time when they were out of costume, kind of like their headshots.
You mentioned the YouTube channel where people can watch videos, and it's a great sort of extra part of this site. We don't think of 19th century performances as something that you can see and hear, but at the very least you get to hear some of the music. You get a better visual sense of what was going on. Why did you think it was so important to include that on the site?
That's a great question, Michael. One reason is that when I first thought of doing a project like this, I wondered why it was that you couldn't see performers in the 19th century the way you can when you Google them or when you're looking at an Instagram of them. So the site, especially the video section, is designed to make it look as if you had done a Google search of an artist and then you were able to see information about them. I love this section. We have a new section that we've added in where you can see sheet music and listen to the sheet music sing songs. It's designed to create a sense of liveness and vitality that moves beyond the archive.
There are some really interesting things that emerge when you're able to explore 19th century performance through this site. I'm wondering about you. What did you find especially surprising as you were organizing this? Something perhaps that surprises visitors when they come to the site?
Well, one of the things is the actual archival documents. Like the broadsides, you can zoom in on sections of the broadsides and see who the performers actually performed with. They're like playbills, but when you really look at them, you can see that there were when you really look at them, you can see that there are all kinds of acts taking place. There might be a musical songs next to a Shakespearean piece. That's one aspect that was very interesting to me. The other is, of course, thinking about how far our first performer, Ira Aldridge, traveled throughout the world. When the performers are located on a mapping display, you can see how they had to constantly travel in order to build their careers. There were not any like long runs for 6 weeks in a single site. What you see instead are people moving from place to place as itinerant travelers, really trying to make a buck. And that's one thing that I found is really interesting about the site. And then there's details. There's a section called Context on the site, which provides details of audience members. I'm starting to love that area a lot because you can see people's reactions to the performance. You can see that the play itself was an event, and people would come to the event to move through the space with their friends, to seduce other men. The sections on audiences allows you to zoom in on primary documents to get a sense of how audiences might have looked during that time period.
Yeah, that's a part of the site that I found especially fascinating and useful. I feel like so often when we do research, we kind of find ourselves speculating about how people responded. Normally, when we teach a play, we give our students probably just the text of the play itself, and we don't really know how people responded to that play. So some of the material in there is great. I wonder if you might share any particular conclusions, things that people might learn about audiences in the 19th century that, again, might be kind of surprising or unexpected.
That they were tiered. I think of audiences as being kind of upper class, and here you can see that it was a popular entertainment. Some of the presentations were popular entertainments and not designed for the elite. And then you can see other areas of the site where the people are interacting and looking out of the balconies and the boxes is kind of a different way of seeing the same event.
Now, you mentioned a moment ago, switching back from audience to performers, you mentioned Ira Aldridge, a huge name in 19th century theater. For those who might not be as familiar with his career, could you explain who he was, why he's so important to understanding 19th century performance?
So Ira Aldridge was an African-American performer who was born in New York. He attended the African Grove, which was the first African-American theater that was ever in New York, in the United States, really. And it was a small theater that was located in Greenwich Village where they performed Shakespearean plays. Ira attended performances there when he was 11 years old and actually believed that he could make a living doing theater in the early 19th century. But he knew that he couldn't do it in New York. His father objected. His father was a minister, and he went to Europe. He made a career for himself in England, but he also traveled as far away as Poland and Russia. He played King Lear in Whiteface. He played roles of Othello. What I've learned from the site about his career is the many different kinds of roles that he played. And this is important to me because it shows a 19th century figure who's trying to define his own image as an African American person at different times throughout his career. One of the things you can see on the website is that there's a letter that he wrote where he signed himself as a Senegalese African, but we know he was born in the United States. So what that makes clear to me is that he developed different persona, different stage personalities, depending on who he wanted to sell himself as. He tended to do performances, as you can see on the broadside, where he would play a comic clown, almost like a slave Sambo buffoon character, but with a West Indian accent. And then he would also play a Shakespearean Othello. And he'd do the same, we do both of those roles on the same evening, so you could see a contrast. You could see the humanity of the man and also the versatility of his acting possibilities.
I always have wondered, sort of one of the things, and I think perhaps there's a tendency to make it a bit of a melodramatic aspect of his biography, but one of the things that always comes up with Aldridge is that he was never able to really return to the United States in a professional capacity. Do you get much of a sense of what Europeans made of him as an African American, as a performer who, as you just pointed out, put on all these different persona?
I think that he didn't want to go back. It was a dangerous time period to go back during the 19th century. I have a project about people traveling in maritime voyages, and you never knew in which port you might be enslaved. I think that he built a career and a family for himself. Remember, he had wives and children in Europe. I think that they didn't view him as American at all. I mean, one of the things I learned looking at pieces like The Padlock, and you could hear it in the recordings online, is that he did them with a Jamaican accent. I think they were much more, he was probably more likely viewed as something from the Caribbean, and he uses the nomer African Roscius after the after the Roman actor Roscius. And so I'm pretty sure that they thought of him as an African first.
He is, as you mentioned, one of these very widely traveled 19th century performers. I think we probably associate the kind of cult of international celebrity with the end of the 20th and the beginning of the 21st centuries. But to some degree, one of the things that you learn looking at this site, especially the mapping feature that you mentioned, is just how broad performers like Ira Aldridge, you mentioned Jenny Lind, just how broad these performers' appeal was in many different countries across many different cultures.
Jenny Lind is another one that's really interesting because she started off when she was performing throughout Europe, she played roles where she was like kind of raunchy and broad, witches. And then when she was supported by Barnum, she came to New York. And in her New York performance, she was playing this kind of demure, swan-like creature that was exactly opposite from who she was in Europe. And then another person who's on the site who people don't know much about at all is Jacob Adler. We put him in because of a graduate student's interest in his career at first. But what he did is he played Yiddish theaters in Eastern Europe. And so it's really interesting to see how small his performing terrain was, because he had to play in places where people spoke Yiddish. And so that little section of the site is only there's a couple of images of him, and then there's a couple of points on the map where you can see the kinds of roles that he played. So it's like a real contrast in the careers of the performers.
In terms of how this project fits into some of the larger currents in scholarship, theater scholarship, and humanities scholarship in general, how do you see this serving as sort of future needs for students, for researchers, anyone who's interested in taking their research and using technology to enhance it?
So this is a digital humanities project, and it was actually kind of expensive to build. But I do think that it is riding the wave of the future, because I think the students today, they really want to see it visual. It's very difficult for them to read cursive, for example, which is what some of our archival documents are based on. They want to be able to form their own connections. One of the things I write about in the Theater Journal article that just came out is about how students tend to open up all the screens on their computers at once. If you offer them a question and say, hey, let's look at whatever, Beyonce, they start to open up their screens and look at Instagram and look at Google and look at Wikipedia all at once. And so the site tries to capture that feeling of being able to surf and play within different sites on the internet so that it becomes an interesting place to go. I think the days of having a single picture and then some information are gone, like the way that we used to think of books, and that a lot of the other digital humanities projects are a little more abstract. You see things that are graphs and diagrams. I think what students really want to do today is to open up a screen and play to find the information and then make their own kind of associations. And I think 19th Century Acts in some way promotes that kind of investigation.
And it's also, as you mentioned, so visual. It's not just documents, as valuable as those are. It allows people to experience a side of theater that often gets lost because we have such a heavy emphasis on reading the script and analyzing the words.
Well, I think I want to give a shout out to Clara McLennan for that, because she kept insisting that we make it visual. There were many times when the programmers and the other people involved in building the site wanted to make it text reliant, wanted to have explanations. They wanted to have what they call scaffolding, which is where you explain why it is that you're doing what you do. And Clara insisted on, no, let's make it visual. They can see an image and draw their own conclusion. We don't have to tell them what to do. They can see the costume. They can look at her folds. They can see her face. And if they do enough surfing and clicking, they'll be able to bring images into dialogue with one another.
I wonder, going forward, if you have any future plans, things that you want to add on or enhance on 19th Century Acts, or future projects that you think your experience with this site can inform?
My experience with this site has let me know how hard it is to do a digital humanities project. I think it's really good as a prototype right now. We did create a back end where it's easy for someone to add another character into it if they wanted to, without having to do a lot of programming in code. It's a simple form that you could put in, and if you put in the dates and places, you can expand it. What we found as the project progressed is that the more data that you put in it, the harder it is to keep the visual, because it becomes a cluttered look. It takes a long time for the images to load in. It makes it a lot more difficult to manage. It becomes unwieldy. So you could replace some of the information easily with another performer and see how that visualizes. That would be a possibility for expanding the tool. But I don't think you'd want a lot more performers than we have in there right now because of the amount of time it takes to download and display. So for my own personal work, it's been fantastic to be able to realize something that actually looks visual and is interesting to play with. I still go to the site. I've been looking at it for 4 years, and I still go to it and say, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know it had that in there. Who put that in there? When did they put that in there? That's kind of cool. But also, I am starting to do some MOOCs, some massive online courses, and I do think that I'll be able to use that tool in some of these courses, and also to think about how to always be prioritizing the visual in any kind of online learning.
Well, great. We will put a link up to 19thcenturyacts.com so that listeners can explore it for themselves. You can really spend quite a lot of time playing around with it and seeing all the different documents and visuals and videos that we mentioned in this interview. Anita, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been great. It's been wonderful to be here and to share this information.
If you'd like to continue today's conversation, please visit howlround.com and follow HowlRound and @TheaterHistory on Twitter. A big thank you to the staff at HowlRound who make this show possible. Our theme music is The Black Crook Gallop, which comes to us courtesy of the New York Public Library Libretto Project and Adam Roberts. Thanks as well to Tip Kress, who designed our logo. And finally, thank you for listening.